This is a massive question, and I'm going to touch on two things that I think might be helpful for you to know out there in the world where lots of people think the Bible's been changed, it can't be trusted, it's been corrupted, there was a conspiracy, etc., etc. So the first bit of the answer is we're going to talk about manuscripts, the text. And then the second bit of the answer, we're going to talk about the content. Is what it actually says true? So first of all, let's look at the manuscripts. When you're dealing with something ancient, which the Bible is, thousands of years old, there are a number of issues that are key. And I want to give you three that are key. The first is the distance between when the text was written and when the events happened. Does that make sense? So when the events happened and when the person wrote about them. If there's a long distance between when the events happened and when they were recorded, people might feel, well, I've got quite good reason not to trust that recording of those events. It's just too far distant to be believable. That's the first question. The second question is then the distance between when the texts were written and the manuscripts that you actually can hold and look at today. So and every ancient text is passed on by generation after generation, copying. Remember, the material used is one of two things. With the Bible, it's either papyrus or parchment. Parchment was made out of the skin of animals. It was more durable. It was used for expensive, valuable documents. Papyrus is a bit like paper. It's an early form of it. Glued together reeds, effectively, a bit like plywood. And much more breakable. So with an ancient document, imagine it's read a lot, it's passed along, you get fragments, bits break off, it needs to be remade, recopied, etc. So there's this question. What's the time distance between when Luke, Matthew, John, whoever, sat down and wrote their gospel and the one I can look at in the British Library or in Magdalen College, Oxford, or St. Catherine's Monastery or wherever? Does that make sense? So that time distance. And then the third question is that of variation. Now, the higher the number of manuscripts you have, in one sense, it's better for the text because it's attested by lots of witnesses. You know, you've got thousands instead of 10. But on the other hand, it also increases the likelihood of error. See, the more times something is copied and human beings are involved, doesn't it increase the likelihood that there would be differences? So, bearing those 3 points in mind, when we look at the Bible, what we see is a very short distance between when the events happened and when they were recorded. And the recording of it happens within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. That is crucial. And when you compare this with other documents, the Bible really stands up. What about this time distance between the manuscripts and the ones that we actually have today? Well, it's amazing what's happening in New Testament research. Don't glaze over at this point. This excites me. But what we're seeing is more and more discoveries are being made of ancient papyri that show this was written in the 1st century. In fact, there's a scholar, you can Google it, called Dan Wallace, who's publishing this year some fragments which were found in a collection in Turkey, including a 1st century fragment of Mark's Gospel, which will be the oldest piece of Mark's Gospel existing today. So as research happens, we're seeing all the time an earlier and earlier date, if you like, for both things. Well, you can come back to me on that. If you're a boffin interested in manuscript questions, come and find me. I'd love to have coffee with you. But does the fact that the text holds up, and incidentally, where there are variations, if you open your English translation of the Bible, what you will see is that where there are variations in the manuscript tradition, Christians aren't afraid of that at all. In fact, there are little letters that point them out for you. In some manuscripts it says this, in others it says that. Now, what does that show? Is that something to be afraid of? Your Muslim friend might say, look, it's been changed. There are these manuscripts that are different. Well, of course, the same is true of the Quran. Except with the Bible, we're not afraid of that. We don't pretend that there are no variations. We're very open about it. What does that show? It shows that there was no central agency controlling the text. It means that scholars can look and search and discover which the earliest true version is and where the variations have crept in, and we're not afraid to do that. Okay, so if the text stands up to scrutiny, is the content true? Should we believe what is written? I could go into a whole piece of research, which I'm not going to, I'm afraid. Again, come and ask me if you're a boffin, about eyewitness testimony that has just really been discovered in about 2002 to 2006. Theologians have been writing about it, that shows that what the gospel records is definitely eyewitness testimony. And that's amazing. It's kind of statistically backed up on all of that. But what about miracles? Can you really believe the miracles in the Bible? Now, the way I would answer that is to say people who haven't read the Bible often imagine that when they read it, it's going to be a bit like reading about someone's weird dream. Does that make sense? It's going to be kind of mythological and bizarre. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of waking up and realizing you were completely engrossed in your dream, where you were flying around, walking through doors, all sorts of bizarre things were happening. And in the dream, you weren't stopping yourself thinking, hold on a minute, I'm human, how am I flying? No, you just go with it. You're totally in it. People imagine the New Testament miracles are a bit like that. Yes, we're in weirdo land. This is the New Testament. Everything's weird and mythological. So, of course, Jesus walked on water. No eyebrow raised whatsoever. Dream world. Wrong. When you read the New Testament accounts of miracles, what you discover, and I think this is extraordinarily important because it's unique in other religious writing, what you see is a genuine human reaction to those miracles. You do not find that in the Quran or in the Hindu Vedas. In other words, the Bible writers realize that when they are telling you Jesus walked on water, this is surprising. In fact, the disciples themselves are terrified. When Joseph discovers that Mary's pregnant, he doesn't think, oh yes, we're in the Bible. Of course it's a virgin birth. I know I haven't slept with her. It must be that she's a virgin and a miracle has happened. No, when he discovers she's pregnant, he assumes, I know I haven't slept with her. Somebody else must have slept with her. So what's his reaction? He's a kind man. He's going to get rid of her quietly. But he's not going to marry her. He's not going to take on someone else's bastard child. Clearly. Only when he sees a miracle, when he sees the angel, is he persuaded of the virgin birth. In other words, when miracles are described and recorded, all of those human reactions of, I'm angry about this situation, or I'm terrified by someone walking on water, that is recorded for us. And that's great reason, I think, to think about miracles. We're going to look at it probably later on from another perspective. How do we deal with an a priori, a commitment, a philosophical commitment to the idea that supernatural things cannot happen? We will look at that too. So that's why I trust the Bible. And then